This week on Front Row, the North Carolina House passed its budget plan. Chaos erupts on the U.S. House floor and dissension in the Democratic Party. Next.
Major funding for Front Row is provided by Econ Air, with additional funding provided by funding for the Lightning Round segment is provided by It's Front Row with host Marc Rotterman.
Welcome to Front Row. I'm your host, Marc Rotterman. Joining us today on the panel, Rick Henderson of Carolina Journal, Representative Ed Hayes, and Bevan Gravely, and Democratic strategist Morgan Jackson. Okay, the House passed a bill or their budget this week. Give us the specifics.
It's a $22.2 billion general fund budget. It includes about a 4% increase in pay for teachers, although that varies based on experience. So some teachers are going to get 15% raises and some are going to get lower raises than that. It includes about a 2% raise for state employees, 1.6% cost of living adjustment for retirees, a slight tax cut, increasing the personal exemption, and about $300 million more into savings accounts, such as the rainy day fund. And it passed by a very large majority, 103 to 12. In fact, Ed was one of the Democrats who voted for the budget.
So it was a kumbaya moment?
Well, it was actually a very unified budget in a lot of ways, and I think, as Ed's colleague Darren Jackson said, they think this is a much better deal than they're going to get from the Senate, so they supported it.
Well, Ed, I noticed that the House plan eliminates 500 first grade teaching positions. Is that going to be a political problem?
I don't think it's going to be a political problem for us. And yes, I knew you would notice such a thing because this budget was absolutely about teachers. And I think that's why you saw so many Democrats vote for the budget. We had 30 go with it this time. I slipped into saying I voted for the budget, except I told people, listen, I voted no twice against the budget last time. This was just tweaking of what wasn't a great budget the last time to something that we could deal with this time. We weren't happy about the 500 positions being cut. I don't think it's going to survive in the Senate. I think it probably was a political ploy, but I think the Senate's going to put that back in because they're going to recognize that with these teacher raises that we have this time, folks are going to want to see more good things happen for teachers, and cutting teacher positions is obviously not a good thing.
It's not a good thing in a political year, an election year.
Correct.
AB, I noticed that there was $300 million went into the rainy day fund as an insurance policy against the next recession. Does your generation view that as economic security?
I think that we do. I think that you're going to see a lot of young people really start to understand the rainy day fund as a savings account. It's a great start for economic prosperity and for being responsible.
So you think, how many of your generation are actually following what's happening? Is it just really politically motivated?
I think we're seeing more people becoming politically motivated with the conversation of free speech on campus, with HB2 bringing focus to the state level.
Now, they speak about this on the safe zones?
They do, absolutely. We're working on actually trying to get rid of free speech zones because, contrary to what it says, it's not actually free.
Morgan, assuming the Senate does sign off the majority of this bill, and the 500 teacher positions are eliminated, isn't that a political issue in the fall?
Yeah, listen, I think a couple things. I think Ed is exactly right. This budget is a good start, and it talks about it addresses a lot of issues. But it also is an election year budget. It's a little bit of something for everybody. It's not a long-term sort of strategy that is playing off of year after year of investment. And election year budgets look like this. They give everybody a little bit of something. There's a raise in there, a little bit of a raise for everybody. But the real question will be what the Senate does. I think there's a lot of different messaging coming out of the Senate, whether or not the teacher raises are going to stay at the level they are, whether or not the state employee raises are going to be in there at all, whether or not there will be sort of a tweaking with the education budget, and we'll have to see.
So you consider the Senate the ultimate decider?
I think ultimately what has happened the last several years, what we've seen is the House lead a lot of these negotiations and start off with a place. And ultimately the Senate, you got to get back to the place. The Senate has taken a much more conservative bend, and so therefore they are the more closer to the ground of where the negotiating begins.
I see that the state invested in a new plane. Is that a good investment for the taxpayers?
You know, it's interesting the way they did that. It's sort of they moved some money around to do that. I think as far as a new state plane, you're talking about the SBI plane.
Right.
I think, you know, if law enforcement needs an SBI plane, needs a new plane, I think that obviously that's something that should be up front. It should not be sort of hidden under transportation costs and things like that.
Rick, do you think that's a good investment? Let's do a quick round robin.
Well, again, as Morgan said, if the SBI needs it, they should put it in the law enforcement budget, take it out of general government spending.
Good investment?
Absolutely. Glad they didn't take it from the transportation budget, though.
I'm going to be
Abby?
contrarian. No, there are lots of other issues that rank higher than that.
And you swear it won't come up in the political year?
Well, the SBI plane, you know, this is the kind of things that often come up in political years when
We won't see this on an ad, will we?
yeah, no, it's exactly the kind of thing you do see on an ad because of the fact it's something that everyday
Long
voters,
history of that in North Carolina.
everyday voters understand. They say you cut education, but you were able to give the state a new plane. That's something that can absolutely hurt folks.
Okay, Rick, let's wrap up the budget. You expect many tweaks to the budget, and you think the House and the Senate will come to agreement pretty quickly, and the governor will sign off?
I think there's going to be an agreement that'll be relatively quick. There may be a lot of negotiating that goes on behind the scenes, but the big thing is the tax cut is set to take effect in over 4 years in the House. The Senate wants to do it in 2. So you're going to have some tweaking if that's the case, just to get the money to even out.
Okay, let's talk about our long national nightmare, and that's HB 2. You know, last week the president weighed in on the controversy, and just a couple of days ago with the LBGT vote, there was chaos after the vote in the U.S. House of Representatives. So, Rick, what's going on? And when the president weighed in, did that change the political equation for McCory?
Changed the political equation a little bit nationally because what it did was it made it a federal issue.
Well, how about here in North Carolina? Did it work to his favor?
I think it probably did because what it did was it simply changed the debate. As we've said the past couple of weeks, if the debate is about bathrooms and locker rooms, then conservatives have the upper hand. If the debate is about discrimination in general, then liberals have the upper hand. And what it's done is it's reshifted the focus.
Well, I think North Carolina basically is just off topic. I mean, I don't see why we can't settle this, frankly, Ed, right here in North Carolina, and we don't need all these folks weighing in.
Yeah, listen, I agree. But what I will also say is this: when we're still, when you're the North Carolina GOP and you're still talking about bathrooms 5 weeks later, you're losing, and the state is losing. And so, you know, once again, it is a blatantly discriminatory bill. I thought the president was right on point with his comments. I think the Department of Justice is right on point. What needs to happen at this point, though, is we need to start thinking about the people, coming together and putting this to rest. It's hurting the state and it's hurting the people of the state.
Well, let me ask you, Ed, are your folks talking to you back home about this in your district?
Absolutely. I can't go anywhere. I went to a ball on Saturday night. As soon as I walk in, they want to pull me aside and start talking about HB2. It is the topic of conversation.
I mean, don't we have bigger fish to fry? I mean, isn't the economy a bigger issue to your folks?
Well, I think this is exactly what we are talking about, the economy. And I think when we talk about discriminatory practices that impact the economy, that will impact jobs long term if we don't fix it, then I think we are talking about the right things.
You do. Anna, what are you hearing from the millennials?
It's definitely still a topic of conversation among the millennial generation. But I think what is positive about it is that it's pulling more people into state level politics. It's not just focusing on the national level, what they're seeing on the news, with the presidential cycle, but we're getting to actually focus on what the state looks like.
So it's on their radar screen.
It is on their radar screen. Yeah.
And a lot of your friends are talking about it. That's the most important issue. They're not talking presidential politics. They're not talking about...
It is outranking, yes.
That's amazing. I mean, Ed, at the end of the day, you think, Morgan, do you think this is going to be a political issue long term?
Absolutely. Listen, when you have an issue that, to Ed's point, that's been on the radar, on the front page, in every national publication, every TV show, every nightly news broadcast for 6 weeks, real voters know more about HB2 than they know about education budgets, than they know about whether their taxes are going up or whether their taxes are going down. This issue is permeated to a very base level in politics. And what you find with folks is they say our state is, we are embarrassed. People are laughing at us all around the country. Jobs are leaving the state. You know, Rick and Ed both made the point about the economy, and the truth of the matter is, this is an economic issue at the end of the day. You have more and more conventions that cancel every day. You have more and more concerts. You just had a Maroon 5 came out this morning and canceled concerts, a large band. But the issue is really not even just this year. what we see a lot, what we hear from economic developers are the projects that we're being taken out that we don't even, that we're in
Conventions?
Yeah, no, I'm talking about actual jobs that when they start narrowing down to 3 or 5 sites around the country they want to look at, or 3 or 5 states. And we've been in a lot of those for a long time because North Carolina has such a strong growth, especially in the Triangle, especially in Charlotte. And we're getting taken out of the mix early. And so these are jobs that will be announced next year that are not coming.
Well, you know, Morgan, when I think about a civil rights issue, I think about the 60s and Martin Luther King. Does this rise to the level of a civil rights issue?
I think this is the new level. This is the new front on civil rights. We saw it with gay marriage, is that was the real new front of people not being discriminated against. And listen, bathrooms, you know, everybody wants to make the argument that bathrooms was not an issue prior to this, and they're right about that. The truth of the matter is the issue and what the corporations and folks are reacting to is the legislature went in and codified discrimination, and the governor is championing it and saying we did it for the right reasons.
So you think this is a winning issue for Democrats in the fall?
Absolutely.
You think it's going to be a top tier issue for Democrats in the fall?
I think you know, we're 6 months from Election Day, a little bit less than 6 months from Election Day. I will tell you that unless something changes to settle this issue, absolutely voters will go to the polls wanting to cure this, especially in urban and suburban voters. There's a lot of swing voters, and it's going to be a big deal.
Quick round robin. Rick, do you think it's a winning issue for Democrats in the fall?
Well, since the state voted almost 70-30 to outlaw gay marriage, eventually lost that argument, I think it's an issue that's still up in the air because, for one thing, it's becoming a national issue, and secondly, you know, the Attorney General of Missouri, who's running for governor, who's a Democrat, has just come out against Obama, so it's going to be an issue that's going to cross party lines pretty soon.
Ed?
My Democratic colleagues welcome our friends on the Republican side continuing to talk about this. We encourage them to send in the clowns.
AB?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Rick. I think that we have yet to see what this is going to look like. I think there's a lot more to come from it.
You know, I think economic security and national security are going to trump everything this fall. And I think that all plays into state and local politics and to national politics. Let's move on to the dissension in the Democratic Party, which just gives me joy, I must say. It seems like Bernie's folks, Rick, are not happy with the establishment. You know, there was violence transpired out in Nevada. And I see that Senator Feinstein reacted and said that she didn't want to see a 68-like type convention in Philadelphia. Can you tell our viewers what she was talking about and what transpired in Nevada?
Well, what happened in Nevada was they had their convention last week in which they picked the final delegates. A lot of the delegates were picked in earlier stages of the campaign, as most caucus states are. And there was concern about the rules that were put forward in the convention because part of it was that during some of the early phases, some of the Hillary Clinton supporters didn't show up, and the Bernie supporters basically outvoted the Hillary supporters. When it came to convention time, all of a sudden, Hillary was winning by voice votes.
Well, Barbara Boxer got booed down out there, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. And the Sanders people are very upset about it. There were reports of chairs being thrown, although that's not been confirmed.
Well, Boxer said she was concerned about her personal security.
Well, there was a chance they actually shut the thing down early because of security concerns. And what's going on right now?
That's a Democratic senator.
And that's a Democratic senator. And then also you have the issue of Harry Reid, who is the outgoing senator from Nevada, who is still by far the most powerful person out there. I worked out there for 4 years. He sees this as a definite affront.
Thankfully, he's leaving.
Well, Bernie Sanders folks don't like Harry Reid very much, and so there's a lot of animosity there. Now, does it mean that there's going to be another, Chicago 68 situation in Philadelphia? Not necessarily so, but the Sanders folks are making it very clear that they're going to fight this out to the very end.
Well, Morgan, do you think the Bernie supporters will hijack the Philly convention for the Democrats?
Listen, Bernie has one.
Does it concern you?
No, it doesn't concern me long term. I think, listen, there's a lot still to be played out in this. Hillary Clinton is going to be the Democratic nominee. It is inevitable. The math is, and what you see a lot is.
That's because of superdelegates, though, right?
Regardless, the rules are what they are, and I say this about Nevada as well. And you see this a lot of times with folks. If you don't like the rules, work to change them. But
right.
the fact of the matter
That's
is,
what the Republicans should do too.
Right, but to go out and raise Cain and try to throw chairs and go insane because you don't like the way the rules are written. That's the impetus is on you and your campaign to figure that out prior to this.
A lot of these folks are new to the system, aren't they?
That's right. But the point of it is, ultimately, Democrats will be fine. They will come together regardless of what happens in Philly and gets everybody together. There's one uniting voice among Democrats, and that is they do not want Donald Trump to be president. And at the end of the day, the folks that are really
Well, now,
upset.
4 out of 10 Bernie voters say they'll vote for Trump.
I don't believe that at the end of the day.
That's what the polls are showing.
I think that is still because they're still feeling the primary engagement of they're so powerfully supportive of Bernie right now, feeling the burn, right? That's right, Rick. But ultimately, when they have a choice between Hillary
I
Clinton,
think it's a McGovern type situation, actually.
I doubt it. I think when they have a choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, you know, every poll I see is that 18 to 30-year-olds, which is the highest demographic for Bernie, the thing that they hate more than anything in this world is Donald Trump. And that will motivate them to turn out in the fall and vote for Hillary.
Well, you know, the truth of the matter is that Hillary's just a bad candidate. Let me just ask you, HB, do you think the millennials that are supporting Bernie will switch to Trump?
I think what we're seeing is that it's bigger than Trump and Bernie. We're seeing that millennials are fed up with the system. They're fed up with their elected officials, and they feel really disillusioned by government. And both Bernie and Trump are talking about issues. It's a different version and different solutions to the issues, but they're talking about issues that matter most.
But they're reaching the same kind of disaffected millennial, right? Mm-hmm. Ed,
Absolutely.
You want to jump in here?
Sure, absolutely. I think first and foremost, let me say, I think Hillary Clinton's a fine candidate. And what I'll also say is this: I think we have to be very careful and understand that what we're seeing with Bernie Sanders and even with Donald Trump is a revolt against establishment politics. And so certainly I think the numbers bear out what they bear out. 18 to 30-year-olders are going to vote against Donald Trump, but 18 to 30-year-olders don't vote. And so when we're talking about 4 out of 10 Bernie Sanders supporters saying that they're going to vote for Donald Trump, I don't think we should discount that at all. We need to be very careful as a party. We need to triple down, quadruple down, and bring these folks back into the party as we go forward.
What I think is the blue-collar millennials that are supporting Trump are going to vote for him. And I think the blue-collar millennials that are supporting Bernie are going to vote because I think they're more motivated than we've seen since 1968. But I want to ask you another question. We see that because of the violence, because of the establishment being in the pocket for Hillary, a lot of folks in your party are calling for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the DNC, to step down. Do you think that's going to happen? Is there a departure imminent?
No, I don't think. Listen, I don't think that's going to happen. Do I agree with everything the chairman has done in terms of the early obvious support and stumping for Hillary Clinton? No, I did not agree with that. But what I will say is that stability at this point is key for our party. We don't need any more upheaval in the party trying to get her to move through. We need to get through this election and then let the process take the route that it will take naturally after Hillary Clinton becomes the next president.
Well, you know, Morgan, Bernie's got about 40% of the delegates going into the convention, approximately, right? So how much influence is he going to have on the platform? And would they be able to sell that platform and that message to the middle class of America?
Well, listen, I think you got to remember that platforms are what they are. They're what the party stands for. It doesn't necessarily end up being what the campaign talks about. What ultimately is going to be on television is the message that Hillary Clinton is going to take to voters, talking about middle class.
So it's on her.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and the same is true with the Republican platform.
So the party doesn't mean much anymore.
It doesn't mean as much. It is certainly diminished over the years. As the platform used to be the calling card of what you said. This is what we're for. The truth of the matter is, the parties are much more identified with who the primary candidate is than who the nominee is.
I'm going to move on here. Listen, we saw earlier this week that Romney suspended his Never Trump campaign, and he's not going to encourage anybody to run. Rick, is the Never Trump effort dead?
Never Trump effort had a body blow this week, that's for sure. I think the interesting
But you're a card-carrying member, aren't you?
I think I've got the hashtag somewhere on there. I think what was interesting this week, and whether it'll make any difference or not overall, is that Gary Johnson, who's the likely Libertarian nominee, has picked Bill Weld, the former governor of Massachusetts, as his running mate. And while that ticket is not going to do much to attract cultural conservatives, it could do something with millennial voters, and it also could do something with, let's say, Silicon Valley types out in various areas that would vote for social liberals but might be fiscal conservatives.
Morgan, don't you see the Republican Party unifying behind Trump right now?
You know, I do. I think a couple things are happening. Trump is the nominee now. Okay, everybody's dropped out. As Rick mentioned, you're seeing all these folks sort of give up the Never Trump movement reluctantly, but they're giving it up.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to get on the ballot, too, and it takes a lot of money.
It is, but at the same time, I still make the argument, and I think we will continue to see. I think there are a number of moderate Republicans across the country that at the end of the day will vote their conscience rather than their party. And I think ultimately there are enough folks out there who don't believe Donald Trump is a good fit and has the right temperament to be president, that whether they stay home, I don't know they'll vote for Hillary Clinton. They may skip the presidential race on the ballot altogether. But
I think conservatives are motivated. They don't want a third term for Hillary Clinton or a third term for Barack Obama. Just one thing, recent polls have Trump up, and then we'll conclude this segment, by 4 or 5 points nationally. You've seen that in Rasmussen, Quinnipiac. Do you think that Trump has a stronger base than Hillary right now?
No, I've seen those 2 polls. I've also seen 4 or 5 polls that have Trump still down, yet gaining ground. One of the things that we have to be concerned about, though, if you are a Democrat and you don't want Donald Trump to win, is a slow creep up among African-American votes, or African-American voters in this country. Last week I saw 2 polls come out that showed African-American voters supporting Donald Trump at 9 to 10%. That is something we have to keep an eye out on and get into the community and see people talking about.
I predict he's going to get 15%. He'll go after the African-American vote.
If he gets 15%,
he'll go to the hood, he'll go to the inner city.
Will be in trouble.
Well, listen, this is a segment I like to call the lightning rounds. So we always start round robin here. We'll start with Rick. Who's up and who's down in North Carolina?
Up is the North Carolina House because they passed the budget so overwhelmingly. Down in North Carolina, probably, I'd say the folks they're trying to figure out when this HB2 thing is going to end and how soon the courts are going to act.
So that's the Republican Party, really. Ed, who's up and who's down in North Carolina?
Teachers are up. Teacher raises, teacher loan forgiveness programs back in place.
Roll tape on that commercial.
Teachers are up. Who's down? Once again, the North Carolina GOP is down. When you're talking about HB2 6 weeks later, you're losing. 6 weeks ago, maybe we're going to win 4 seats. Today, I don't know, 10 to 12.
AB, who's up and who's down in North Carolina?
I'm going to say the North Carolina House is up this week. And then down would be Congressman Renee Elmers, having a hard time standing up to her record.
Bad night last night, I thought. Morgan,
yeah,
who's
I
up
agree.
and who's down?
Listen, I agree with what everybody said. I think the House has done a good job of moving forward and passing a budget very quickly. When we talk about being down, HB2, North Carolina GOP, but at the end of the day, that lies at the feet of Governor McCrory, and he continued. He's had 6 weeks of bad weeks in a row, and that's tough in a re-election battle.
Okay, let's go around the table again. Rick, who's up and who's down nationally?
Nationally, Donald Trump's up this week because he's not having a campaign. He's basically
and
being
his
able to
poll numbers are up. It's down 15 points negatively.
Who's down? I think right now nationally Democrats are down because they're still fighting this thing out.
I concur with that.
Yeah, I would once again have to agree. I think Donald Trump has had a pretty decent week. I'm not happy about it, but I think he's definitely up. Down this week, I would say the idea of unity and some of the things that we're seeing happening in the House of Representatives. Votes changed last night to ensure that Republican votes couldn't support non-discriminatory action in the House, and
well,
so down as a country.
I'm told that Ryan didn't even know that amendment was coming up, so that was bad staff work and bad floor work. AB, who's up and who's down nationally?
Up, President Obama with his commencement speech at Rutgers University, defending free speech on campus, and down would be the voters in Nevada.
Who's up and who's down nationally?
I think Trump has had a good couple of weeks, largely because he is the nominee now, largely because Democrats continue to fight it out. I think down is definitely Bernie Sanders with the debacle in Nevada, and that's not the way you want to finish a presidential campaign.
Right, I agree with that. Okay, we'll go start another one with you. A quick lightning round question. In the interest of transparency, should Governor McCrory release his travel records, Rick?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no doubt about that.
Agree with that, Ed?
Yes, absolutely.
I agree.
AB?
100%.
100%. Should Trump release his tax returns, Rick?
Yes.
Yes.
Ed?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Do you think, Rick, that Hillary's losing ground with Trump?
I think that Hillary's had 2 layups in a row, 2008 and 2016, and she's missed both of them so far.
She can't take things for granted, and I don't want to see her do that. It could be bad news for her.
AB?
I agree with everybody. It is definitely not the smooth sail that she thought it was going to be.
Tougher than we thought?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Bernie Sanders has been a tougher primary opponent than anybody anticipated. But I think, listen, when Clinton gets a nomination and the convention's over with, things will head in the right direction.
Her problem is she's not Bill Clinton. I mean, he was a great campaigner, let's face it. That's a hard act to follow.
Greatest ever.
You know, Hillary's losing ground to Trump in 2 polls and 2 national polls. But with the rise of Trump and Bernie, is the D.C. establishment down, Rick?
Oh, well, definitely down. Now, the question's going to be if it's Hillary or Trump winning in November. I think the D.C. establishment is going to figure out a way to make peace with either one of them.
Establishment down?
It's down. Can
Both
they?
parties?
Yeah, I believe so. Both parties down.
Both party lines down, AB?
Yeah,
Morgan?
absolutely.
Well, that about concludes our show for today. I want to thank our panel, and I want to thank you for watching Front Row. We'll be back next week with some interesting topics, talking national politics and North Carolina policy. I'm Marc Rotterman. Thank you very much.
Major funding for Front Row is provided by Econ Air, with additional funding provided by funding for the Lightning Round segment is provided by It's Front Row with host Marc Rotterman.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.